Imagine wandering deep into an uncharted forest, only to hear the thunderous footsteps of something impossibly large. Or scaling a remote mountain peak and spotting a shadowy figure, twice the height of a grizzly bear, watching you from afar. For centuries, terrifying accounts of mysterious giants have surfaced from remote corners of the world, leaving scientists baffled and locals too afraid to ever return. But are these just myths? Or something much, much worse? Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will make you question everything. Number 10. The Kandahar Giant, the U.S. military's most shocking encounter. It was 2002, deep in the desolate mountains of Afghanistan. A special operations unit vanished while patrolling a cave system. Another team was sent to investigate, but what they found was beyond belief. Out of the darkness emerged a massive, red-haired humanoid, standing over 13 feet tall, wielding a huge spear, and moving at terrifying speed. The soldiers unleashed a hail of gunfire, but it took over 30 seconds of concentrated fire to bring the creature down. 30 seconds. Think about that. What kind of flesh and bone could withstand that level of firepower? But here's the real mystery. After the body was recovered, it vanished. No official records, no government acknowledgement. Just whispers among soldiers who saw too much. Could this be proof of ancient Nephilim still walking among us? Number 9. The Siberian Yeti, the Dyatlov Pass Massacre. A group of 9 experienced hikers set out on a trek in Russia's Ural Mountains in 1959. None of them made it back. When search teams found their campsite, they discovered something horrifying. Their tent had been shredded from the inside out, as if they were trying to escape something. But what? The bodies were scattered across the snow, some with crushed skulls and broken ribs, injuries resembling a car crash, yet with no external wounds. Even more chilling, traces of radiation were found on their clothes. Soviet investigators hushed up the case, but locals had their own explanation. A massive Yeti-like creature was spotted in the area that same winter. The government dismissed it, but a private diary entry from one of the victims had just 2 words. "We are being watched." Who, or what, was watching them? Number 8. The Lovelock Cave Giants, the skeletons they tried to hide. In the early 20th century, miners digging in Lovelock Cave, Nevada, uncovered something shocking. Gigantic human skeletons, some over 10 feet tall. But that's not even the scariest part. Local Paiute legends spoke of red-haired cannibal giants who once terrorized their tribes. The Paiutes claimed to have driven them into the cave and set it on fire, sealing them inside forever. But when archaeologists arrived, they found strangely large skulls, massive tools, and burnt remains exactly as the legends described. The bones were collected, and then, gone. Vanished. The Smithsonian took possession, and to this day there's no official record of their existence. Why would such a discovery be covered up? Because if giants were real, history would have to be rewritten. Number 7. The Alaskan Bushmen. Vanishing villages and a monster's wrath. In the heart of Alaska, entire villages have mysteriously disappeared without a trace. The native Athabascan people speak in hushed tones about the Tornit, a huge, hairy humanoid that steals people in the dead of night. One particularly bone-chilling case comes from Portlock, Alaska, a fishing town that was suddenly abandoned overnight in the 1940s. The reason? Bodies were being found torn apart, limbs scattered as if by some massive beast. Tracks too large for a bear led into the wilderness, but never came back. The few survivors swore they saw something massive, walking upright, covered in thick fur. The town remains deserted to this day. Could these creatures still be lurking in Alaska's endless forests? Number 6. The Giant of Borneo, the viral footage they want you to forget. In 2017, drone footage surfaced from the jungles of Borneo, showing something staggering, a 20-foot-tall humanoid, striding through the dense rainforest with terrifying ease. At first, skeptics called it fake, until biologists examined the footage. The movement, the shadows, the scale. It was too perfect to be CGI. The footage was pulled offline within hours, and the account that posted it? Gone. Locals whisper of Orang Dalam, a race of enormous hidden beings that protect the forest and punish those who venture too close. Here's the twist. Multiple explorers have gone missing in the exact area where the footage was taken. Coincidence? Or is there something out there that doesn't want to be found? Please subscribe, because hitting your subscribe button can give me new motivation to work harder and succeed. Let's resume. Number 5. The man who survived the Amazon alone for 50 days. That's exactly what happened to Yossi Ginsberg, an Israeli adventurer whose dream trek turned into a living nightmare. After being separated from his group, Yossi had no food, no map, and no survival gear, just the clothes on his back and a desperate will to live. For the first week, he relied on berries and river water, but then the real horror began. One night, while sleeping under a tree, he was awakened by excruciating pain in his scalp. Termites were burrowing into his skin. Days later, he stumbled into a swarm of fire ants that covered his body in burning welts. With his skin infected, his body covered in sores, and his strength fading, hope seemed lost. But the jungle wasn't done torturing him. A jaguar began stalking him. One night, as he dozed near a riverbank, he felt something watching him. He turned and saw the glowing eyes of a massive jaguar, ready to pounce. With no weapons, he had only one option. He lit an aerosol can on fire and aimed it at the beast, creating an improvised flamethrower. The jaguar retreated, but Yossi knew he wouldn't survive another encounter. On the verge of death after weeks of hallucinations, starvation, and parasites, he was finally rescued by a local search party. He had lost over 30 pounds. His body was covered in wounds, and his mind was forever changed. Number 4. The woman who fell 10,000 feet and walked away. This survival story sounds impossible, but it's 100% true. Juliana Kupka, a 17-year-old girl, was flying over the Amazon rainforest when her plane was struck by lightning and exploded in midair. She was still strapped into her seat as she plummeted 10,000 feet to the ground. By some miracle, she survived the fall with only a broken collarbone, deep cuts, and a concussion. Now she was alone in one of the most dangerous places on Earth, a jungle filled with deadly snakes, piranhas, and jaguars. Her only hope was to find water and follow it downstream. She had no food, no weapons, and no idea where she was. Her greatest enemy? The insects. Her wounds became infested with maggots, burrowing into her flesh. With no tools, she poured gasoline into her cuts, forcing the maggots to writhe out of her skin. Weak from hunger and infection, she kept walking for 10 days, surviving on small sips of river water and scavenged fruit. Just as she was about to lose all hope, she stumbled upon a hunter's hut. Locals found her and took her to safety. Doctors were shocked. Her survival was medically improbable. She had fallen from a plane and walked out alive. Number 3. The man who drank his own urine and ate a snake to survive. If you were trapped in the desert with no water, scorching heat, and no sign of rescue, would you be able to survive? Mauro Prosperi, an Italian marathon runner, had to make the hardest choices imaginable to stay alive. During an ultramarathon in the Sahara Desert, Mauro got lost after a brutal sandstorm sent him miles off course. He was alone in a landscape so hot that his sweat evaporated before it even formed. With no food, no water, and no shade, he faced a grim reality. Survive or die. His first move? Drinking his own urine. As disgusting as it sounds, it was the only way to stay hydrated in the brutal heat. Then, he found a small desert snake, killed it with a rock, and ate it raw. It wasn't enough. His body started to shut down. Desperate, he tried to end his suffering by slashing his wrists, but his dehydrated body was too weak to bleed properly. He lay in the sand, waiting for death. But death never came. On the 9th day, he saw a caravan of Tuareg nomads in the distance. Using his last ounce of strength, he signaled for help. Against all odds, he survived, but doctors said it was a miracle. He had lost 40 pounds, was severely dehydrated, and his body was covered in burns. Number 2. The fisherman who spent 438 days at sea. Imagine being lost at sea for over a year, with no land, no supplies, and no rescue in sight. That's exactly what happened to Jose Salvador Alvarenga and his companion, who were swept away by a storm while fishing off the coast of Mexico. For the first few weeks, they survived on their limited food supply, but when the food ran out, they were forced to drink rainwater and eat raw fish, birds, and even turtles. After 2 months, his companion gave up, refusing to eat, and he died. Jose, left alone with only a decomposing body for company, had to make an impossible decision: either starve or do the unthinkable. Desperate, he did what few could stomach. He used his dead friend's flesh to survive. He drifted for over a year, enduring shark attacks, monstrous waves, and complete isolation. His hair and nails grew long, his body was covered in salt sores, and his mind was fractured from loneliness. Finally, after 438 days, he washed ashore in the Marshall Islands, barely alive but still breathing. Number 1. The man who chewed his own arm off to survive. You've heard of Aaron Ralston, but his story is even more brutal than you think. In 2003, he was hiking alone in Utah's Blue John Canyon when a massive boulder crushed his right arm, trapping him in place. He had no cell phone, no signal, and only a few sips of water left. For 5 days, he suffered in agonizing pain, waiting for a rescue that never came. His arm began to rot, and he knew he had to make a choice: die or cut himself free. With a dull, cheap multi-tool, he sawed through his own flesh, nerves, and tendons. But then, he reached the bone. With no other option, he snapped the bone using the weight of his own body. Bleeding and barely conscious, he rappelled down a 65-foot cliff and walked 6 miles until he found help. Against all logic, he survived. His story became a Hollywood movie, but no film could capture the true horror of his suffering. Which of these survival stories shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments. And if you love shocking, jaw-dropping survival tales, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because hitting your subscribe button can give me new motivation to work harder and succeed. See you in the next one. See.